All right, and
Here we go.
There it goes. Okay.
Cool.
Hi guys. So it's Chris and Steven again, and I didn't do a stream on Saturday, and there's a couple of reasons for that. And we both have good news. Both of us have good news. And my good news is that I have a new sponsor, and it's Streetwear Bears, along with Prolific, and I'll be working with them, and you'll be hearing a lot more about them in the near future. And Steven has good news. He might want to share, and he might not want to share, and it's up to him. And
I recently started seeing a lovely lady named Christine. She said I could mention her by name specifically. Just want to give a shout out to her. I hope you're watching this, darling. I'm sure you will shortly after this comes out. So I'm very happy. We've been spending some time together. It's been going very well. I'm looking forward to spending more time with her, see how it goes, and hopefully she got to meet Chris as well, and hopefully get to meet Mom and Dad and everyone else. She will too, especially once this weather finally warms up and the city's pleasant to walk in during the day.
I can't wait.
Yeah, me too.
And we're all standing back and watching the cuteness. So yeah. And what happened, and we can talk about what just happened too. So I just downloaded an update for my computer, and it made it so the microphone just didn't work, and I couldn't figure out why. And it turned out I have to give it permission for it to work again. And I just went through like a whole mind-numbing experience. And at this point, I'm like totally wrong.
And I felt
Steven.
I felt kind of stupid about it too, because I remembered with the iPhone updates, you go through the same thing where you have to reauthorize such and such would like to access your contacts or whatever. Do you give it permission? And then it occurred to me, well, it's probably the same thing with this, because there's some legal thing if they share new information, or there's other things in there where it's they have to get your permission, or maybe someone could sue them saying you're taking information against our will or something.
I'm thankful for it. I agree with it. Now it all makes sense. I just, I expected to be able to do this about 40 minutes ago. You wish it were like the iPhone, where it just said it asked your permission. You could just say yes, and then it would be done. Well, at first we were going to do this probably at around 4:30, and then we found out that someone had reserved this room at 5. And, I like those people especially, but then they also paid for it, so it's not like I could argue. And then, so we're there, and I'm writing up this contract I got to write up anyway. So it's and then these people leave, and then I'm like, wow, I'm a bit stressed because I got to get all into this situation. And so I'm trying to set this up, and all the electronics are fighting me. And I'm like, is Mercury in retrograde? Mercury's not in retrograde, nothing like that. Anyway, I'm just a crazy person. That's a fact. And I'm stressed out. I'm always drinking my coffee.
And I have tea. That's hence the title. I can't drink coffee too later. I'll be up all night.
We're experimenting with themes. Yeah. So what am I saying?
I love coffee during the day. I had a cocktail recently with coffee in it, which I like. But if I have it now, I'll just be up all night and.
Yeah, exactly. We got totally different body chemistry. What am I saying? I'm saying that right after that, then I tried to do this at night.
Yeah.
And then I discovered the audio problem, and it seems to come out of nowhere, and I don't even want to believe it, but thank God I did believe it, because last time we had sort of an audio problem towards the end. And it's funny, our feminist videos are cursed. Cursed. God does not want us to finish our thought on that, or physics, whatever deity you bring.
The universe itself.
Yes, the logos is no. And I honestly do take that. I'm a crazy person. I do take it as an infinite dialectic. I actually see it that way, and I feel and that's why kind of towards the last one I was like, it's a red herring, isn't it? All because that's total bullshit. The idea of a solid, because this all started, the reason why it all made sense to me as a youngin was that the problem was gender roles were too kind of forced. So it was the idea okay, well, genetic predisposition be damned. Not that it didn't exist, but, we're all different. And so you shouldn't expect everyone to be the exact same archetype the exact same way. That's all. That was my understanding, and I thought it made perfect sense because it actually like validates your individual tastes, no matter what you might be into. And they didn't like that because that didn't cause fights, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's definitely, I understand why it's a controversial subject, but I think it's important to have frank discussions about it because, like, because there are too many things. Like, I brought up the gender wage gap, which has been debunked countless times, and I make the point that so many people just take this for granted, but they have no idea. It's not even that it's wrong, it's they don't even know where the numbers came from or why people are saying that. It's just, you're supposed to believe this. And I don't know if I mentioned in the last discussion, but I posted on Facebook about it, like even the gender stuff, like people put pronouns in their profile, ask them where gender theory came from, they ask them about the thinkers, they have no idea. It's just, I'm supposed to believe this, and this is what good people believe, so I'm going to go along with it. But it's like, but there's no understanding of where, like, how this even came into existence.
And I honestly think it's really disgusting to think that you should treat somebody a certain way based on demographic statistics.
Yeah, of course.
Like, that's the thing. So it's not like I'm saying, like, oh, don't treat women a certain way or don't treat men a certain way. But this all started with this idea that, we're supposed to be using science as some statistical analysis of society.
Yeah.
And that's actually, first off, they hate that. They actually, when you do that, and they, like, you show it works, they get really angry and offended, and they start calling the Asians white and shit. They start going crazy because none of their shit makes any fucking sense.
No.
On Earth, the physical planet, what dialectic they're talking about, I don't fucking know. That's the interesting thing.
Well, an important point to bring up, and I've said this a lot to people in conversations, but all these ideologies, like whether it be Marxism or its offshoots, postmodernism, the branches of feminism, gender theory, the problem is that these people saw themselves as the heirs of the Enlightenment. Oh, we're continuing science, we're continuing reason, all this. But in reality, they were born out of people that went against the Enlightenment. That's why they reject objectivity. That's why the whole my truth, your truth thing. That's why, the gender stuff is not scientific at all.
The progressives' problem with Enlightenment, with the Enlightenment values, is that you can't advance past the scientific method.
Yeah.
You can't. There's no progress past that.
Yeah.
Once you have the scientific method, all you can do is do that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and that means there's validity to everyone who's ever been using that, and that means they have to validate a whole bunch of people that they don't want to because they want to start at year zero.
Yeah.
And all of society is supposed to be this conservative mess. But I don't want to get too far into go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, basically what I was getting at is it could be argued, and Stephen Hicks, who I've met in person, I actually have a picture on Facebook, he wrote that book explaining postmodernism, and his argument is that postmodernism basically emerged as a reaction to the failures of socialism. Basically, the idea that socialism was supposed to be scientific, rational, all this, and then what in reality just led to mass death, starvation, all this. Then they realized, okay, the problem is reason, objectivity, all that has to be discredited, and then that was their way. His argument, which of course I agree with, is that this is a way of trying to sort of slip it in because they realize they can't win the argument on scientific and logical grounds.
And that's the sad thing is that when I went through that scenario, it wasn't and I looked at the USSR and that was so bad.
Yeah.
I didn't really get to look at that.
No.
I just got to look at America's statistics. I'm still invested in America. I want America to do well. And in America statistically, regulation creates generational poverty for Americans, and the more they are regulated, whether you're giving money to them or taking it away from them, you're usually making them poor generationally, and that's just statistical fact. So it's not like I'm because our way is better. No, the way this was introduced to me was that that was the only way. You got to regulate everything. There was no choice. And there was this old philosophy that crazy people think, they used to think, no one even thinks it anymore, except for these like people that are like far away in the middle of America somewhere. But mysteriously, we're totally wrong, or not we're wrong. Everything we do actually fucks things up and we know it and we push for it more. And the guy told me, and I don't want to say his name because I'm basically accusing him, but it's what he did in class. Okay, when I asked a question, when I pointed this out, and I pointed out, like I asked and I showed it, and he was like, yes, statistically, these systems to subsidize, the poor have created generational poverty that was not there before and made people poor.
Yeah.
And I said, so shouldn't we advocate for it to stop? And he goes, no, if we advocate for it to stop, people will not help each other. So it's literally like everything, like they act like you won't be able to read if you don't go to school, and mysteriously our literacy rates keep going down.
Literacy was higher before the Department of Education came into existence. I had that argument with someone on Facebook because I said they were talking about getting rid of it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, who needs education?" I'm like, "No, you don't get it." I'm like, literacy, education levels. Like, I mean, if you want to be technical, yeah, people spend more time in school today, but like more hours. But I mean, does it amount to a more educated population? I would argue no. And there's studies showing this about certain schools, especially in the inner cities, they're abolishing basic standards because people can't make them. And it's like all this money, all this time spent in school, and for what? I mean,
like people, I think that the most general confusion that people have with me is they seem to think that I was raised by basically right-wingers, and I was raised by Democrats from a country with people who believe in Catholic regulations and people who believe in Protestant regulation. And those are the two called nationalists and laborists. Okay?
Sure.
So basically they think like Democrats, where they don't really see a right wing, they see kind of like a left wing, more nationalist.
Sure.
Yeah. And basically what I'm saying is, and here they're just Democrats, and so people like seem to think like you've said, I think you said it earlier today, we weren't live before.
Yeah.
You said people they give you this answer, no matter what response you might have, you might contradict their entire narrative. You're just uneducated.
Yeah. But what I said was, it was courtesy of my friend Mikhail. Give him a shout out. He made the point. He said, certain people will dismiss what you say and they'll say, oh, you just don't agree with me because you're not educated. But what they don't consider is that they themselves may be in a position where they don't know certain things, and if they were exposed to certain ideas, their views would change.
Absolutely.
But they just assume I have all the answers, and the only reason you don't agree is because you're uneducated.
Right, and it implies, well, it must be where you came from.
Yeah.
You must have never heard my side of the story.
Yeah.
It's not even really uneducated. Like they're perfectly aware that there are people who are educated who disagree with them.
Yeah.
And they think that there's information that they haven't heard.
Yeah.
And I used to be one of those people.
Yeah.
I used to think there was information that I hadn't heard. And I went to college and asked the question, and the guy told me, no, we're fucking over the poor, and we're doing it condescending and self-righteous. And he actually, I can give you a brain teaser, and maybe they're both still there. So, I went to Hostos Community College, and my political science professor had the same last name as my economic science professor. And if you can figure it out, you figure out who they both are, and you can be like, nothing. Nothing. You can tell people that they're doing what every single college professor is expected to do at this point.
Yeah.
Be like, yeah, sell out, kids. You're a revolutionary. Stay in school till you're 60, and that means you're successful. Sorry.
But this was my earlier point too. What I said to you about like they say, oh, people are not educated enough, but then I'm like, but people spend more time in school than ever, and I'm like, it used to be that dropping out of high school was common. Now you're not supposed to do it. Now people are saying, oh, the bachelor's degree is a new high school diploma. Okay, like you take this to its logical conclusion, then what? Everyone needs a PhD to start working. I mean, the whole point of a PhD was that you have specialized knowledge if you're delving deep into a particular field. And I was saying how I have a relative who has a background in engineering and physics, and he stopped with a master's, and he said the reason for that is because if he were to go to a PhD that would focus more on research and everything, he said, no, I just wanted to go out and build things. Like, if I wanted to study physics, study engineering, do research and equations, all this, yeah, that would be worth it. But if I just want to go out and create things in the real world, well, I'm going to get as much education as I need to do that, and then I'm just going to go on.
And this actually veers perfectly into what I think might become our main topic today.
Yeah, sure.
So it's interesting. So we were in a situation where I would say for the Western world especially, the economy was better than ever, and technology is still moving forward, I'd say, but it was spreading to a degree. And if you look at the last 100 years, the last 50 years, and look at the poverty statistics, they've gone down rapidly.
Yeah.
And if you look at the
well, worldwide poverty has gone down.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. But especially, we were in a good. I'm saying the Western world definitely should have noticed. Like if I remember correctly, in America, Black Americans were doing better than ever in history.
Yeah.
Very recently. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and for whatever reason, recently, the left wing propaganda has gotten more frantic.
Yeah.
That as like this statistic of poverty going down happens, for some reason these people freak out, and what they basically claim is that an apocalypse is coming. And when I was growing up, I remember, and I learned this in college and shit, unfortunately, from the UN, New York City's gonna be underwater in 2014, guys. We gotta stop and we have more carbon dioxide because carbon dioxide isn't what causes the temperature, because the temperature is part of the sun, and the sun is likely part of this giant system we cannot comprehend. But
do you know who Judith Curry is?
No, not
so I would highly recommend looking into her. She was actually a climate scientist that worked at, it was a university in Georgia, I forget the name. But here was the controversy. She got in trouble and she ultimately quit her post. All she said was that CO2 on its own is not the be all end all of climate. That's all she said.
That's all she
Yes. And the fact, and it was funny because I heard interviews with her and they asked her, like, what did you say? And she's like, all I said is that it's more complicated than this, because you have to look at the sun, as you say, you have to look at the effect of the ocean absorbing the water, you have to look at, CO2 but
scientifically they broke that narrative actually, if you check.
But they interviewed her and they were like, that's it. She's like, that's it. That's all I said. But the fact that even saying that, and some people drew the analogy to economics, like, being an economics nerd myself, it's like there's so many variables that go into the economy. Saying CO2 will cause the world to end, that's like saying jacking up the minimum wage is going to wreck everything. It's like it'll have an impact, but it's one of many factors. It's not like you change this one thing and everything.
And they lose on the scientific front, and then on TV they simply act like they never did.
Yeah.
Like for decades and decades, and this has been happening on different levels. And I'm not going to get into all of them with you right now.
Yeah.
And you can go ahead and think I'm a fucking crazy person, but I'm also not underwater.
Yeah.
And I might not be, paid a lot of money to tell you that, but I'm also able to breathe oxygen, and I'm glad that I didn't sell, any seaside property because I thought, oh, Al Gore is taking care of me. No. Don't get me wrong, I believed him at the time, but I was too young to do anything too stupid. God bless.
But it's not just that. I mean, I can bring it up for you. You've probably seen that whole list of predictions since at least the 70s. Since there's going to be a new ice age. Oh, killer bees. Oh, London is going to turn into Siberia by 2000. It's like every single one has been wrong, and it's like, why should I be convinced for sure it's going to happen this time? It's like, I mean, by like you even said, I mean, they were saying Al Gore when he put out his film, he was saying by now things would be underwater, and we know that's not, and that's recent times. You go through all these predictions; they're all wrong. It's like, why should I believe him for sure this time? It's like the Christian apocalyptic that say, oh, Christ is going to return any time now. They've been saying it for 2,000 years. It's like,
that's still more likely because you're supposed to not know.
Yeah, but it's like why for sure it's right this time. It's like, come on, guys.
But
yeah.
Anyway, yes, it's like magic. He's correct.
Yeah.
He's correct.
Yeah.
He's correct. And if you believe in magic, you should have to witness it to a degree.
Yeah.
Any sort of anything. I don't care how crazy it is. I believe crazy things. And I've seen and I've witnessed crazy things. You can think I'm a crazy person. Maybe I am.
No, nobody thinks that.
See? I'm definitely going crazy now. But I'm saying, like, really though, like, even I use the fucking scientific method.
Yeah.
Flat earthers use it to a goddamn degree. And boosh. So we're not underwater, okay? Now let's continue. So just a little while ago, all right, whether or not, and I'm barely, like, I just happen to know more than most people, and I know an increment about macroeconomics, an increment, and enough that I can navigate. But you can fucking see, like, the difference, right? And things are definitely much worse now. People are relegated, like, people have less rights and lower living standards on the whole now. You can see that, right? And there was this idea that we were doing this to put our living standards forward. So there's another apocalypse coming from science. And the people were saying, like actual doctors and scientists and people who, you know, have a memory of anything, like middle school for me, that made COVID like, like, yes, I know how the immune system works, yes. Oh, anyway, but it's not the point. So all of this was to protect these people who were gonna get sick, or they were sick, and the elderly, and all of this, and there was all this, people were collapsing in China supposedly, and all of
yeah,
this.
it didn't happen.
Right, and everybody who wanted to get on with their lives, they were selfish, remember?
We wanted to kill grandma.
You wanted to kill grandma, you just wanted to get a haircut. Right.
And then Pelosi gets caught out going to get her haircut.
You are vanity, and their vanity is value.
Yeah.
Right. Because, it's classism, it's classical.
Yeah.
And class, what does that word come from? The Roman tax system. That's a class. A class is a tax bracket.
Yeah.
So when they say be class conscious, saying be conscious of how the government classifies that person and how much money that we can make off that person. So anyway, let's continue. Sorry. So we were at this awesome peak, all right? And we had a guy that was making medicine cheaper. And then these people who claim they care about medicine and the economy and the poor, somewhat, because there are people who are really fucked up and there are people who are really stupid.
Yeah.
But there are good people who gave them the benefit of the fucking doubt.
Yeah.
That even if they were total fucking morons, that they cared enough about the shit that they were saying that once it became obvious that this was total fucking bullshit, that it would stop. And now, we're in Ukraine. We gotta talk about Ukraine. We're getting rid of this stupid shit.
We're not in Ukraine, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, right. Thank you. He's got a point. We got Stinger.
We don't have boots on the ground, or as far as we know, anyway. Unless
we have Stinger rocket launchers and another type of rocket launcher. One for tanks and one for planes.
Javelins, is it?
Javelins. There, he's got it. So what am I trying to say?
Well, and now all the COVID stuff is ending. Like the city is repealing the vaccine mandates on March 7th.
People died because they didn't go to the hospital to check on their cancer and shit.
Yeah.
People weren't able to be with their loved ones.
And it's messed up too. And SNL did this skit like joking about it. I haven't watched the skit.
They sent them to die.
I haven't watched it.
Because it's too late now. They already made their money.
I haven't watched it yet, but apparently SNL did a skit showing like, yeah, guess what, guys? These mandates didn't really help, but oh well. And it's like, you realize you wrecked businesses, you wrecked tourism, you people committed suicide, alcohol and substance abuse, the speech development thing. Like, there's so many issues, but it's just like, oh yeah, by the way, we kind of goofed. I'm like,
and my favorite thing is that they're kind of they kind of wish Ukraine was in NATO.
Yeah.
And they're trying to act like, oh, USSR.
Yeah.
Who's acting like the USSR? I'm not in Russia. I have no idea what it's like over there.
What I've been saying lately is that I don't know exactly what to believe.
Point right at some fucking USSR people.
Well, what I've been saying is I don't know 100% what to believe, because the thing is there's so much like propaganda on either side out there. Because there are people who say, oh, Kiev is surrounded, it's about to fall. The people who say, oh,
I can show you a map.
Ukrainians.
I don't know how accurate, but it's the
but then
map.
there are other people who are saying the opposite, like, oh, the Ukrainians are routing the Russians, and it's like that's not really true either.
Yeah. People nearby, sorry.
But it's like it's hard to know what to believe, because each side says, oh yeah, we're winning, but it's like, unless you're there, I mean, how do everyone's, because the Germans at the end of World War II did the same thing, like, oh yeah, the Allies are retreating, we're winning this, and like we all knew, that's not the case. But it's like they have to tell their population that, otherwise they're just going to surrender. So
that's true. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
yeah. What I heard from a more local, like the Romanian, V.
Yeah.
So I watch V.
Yeah.
Romanian TV or whatever.
Okay.
He calls himself on YouTube. And what did he say? He basically said that for sure the media has been making this idea that Ukraine can't defend itself.
Yeah.
If you actually look at Ukraine's the second largest European country, by
landmass,
sheer landmass, right? So essentially, invading Ukraine is like invading Afghanistan with ice. Yeah. Sort of. So I not even theories. I'm not even at theories yet, because that place is so far away and I have to rely on. But this guy's more local, so I believe
Romania's right there.
Romania's right there, and I know that these people intermingle quite a bit, so it's not going to be total bullshit what he's saying. And he basically said that it's easy to come in, but maintaining those supply lines is a total pain in the ass. Yeah. Especially when the locals know the place better than you. And so essentially, and so another thing I was hearing was that a lot of what we're seeing is just, well, not even what we're seeing. Are we seeing much of anything? So
what we're seeing is propaganda. That's the thing. And then like there was a whole thing about, what was there, that island where they said all the soldiers were killed, and then it turned out that wasn't true, that they're still alive but they're captive. There was that fake fighter ace. There were things like that. But it's like, it starts where it's like somebody circulates this thing and then it just goes viral, and then you find out the whole thing was made up.
Yeah.
But everyone, and one of my Facebook friends commented on this, the problem is like, everyone's kind of invested in one narrative or the other, and then confirmation bias kicks in, so people look at the things they want to believe, and then you find out that was fake, and then there's the opposing thing, and then that was fake, and then it's like, what do you actually believe?
Yeah, and I love, I hate to say it, but I obviously have a guilty pleasure when it comes to this stuff. I'm into Mobile Suit Gundam and stuff, and strategy games. And
we were watching it earlier.
Yeah, exactly. I'm that guy, and so it's easy for me to be like, I have the map, I know Kiev is not surrounded, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And it's but I really I wish I knew what was going on. I'm also hearing so from what I understand, the Ukraine is quite it's balkanized in itself, kind of socially. So those two places that declared independence were already kind of no-go zones for the government. I would recommend,
I posted a really good video earlier. It's about half an hour long. It's on my Facebook page for those who follow me. Basically, the author, the creator of the video explains it very well, and he explains about how it's really interesting with the Crimea, because apparently with the Crimea, the issue is that there's a warm water port where they can ship natural gas out of. That's why Russia wants it, because Russia only has cold water ports otherwise. And the issue is that when the Ukrainians ran it, Ukrainians put tariffs on all this stuff going out of that to collect money. And of course, the Russians don't want that, because then that raises the prices, which of course people don't want to pay, and then they buy it from elsewhere and look to alternatives.
So it's very valuable to them. They're making their...
But then apparently there was something about Ukraine cutting off because a lot of the water water in the Crimea is swampy, and then it's ocean. It's the what is it? The Black Sea surrounding it.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue is that the water itself in Ukraine Crimea actually isn't that good. So the issue is water has to be sent from other parts of the Ukraine. But after Russia took it over, apparently Ukraine was cutting it off. So then that creates other problems. But then the debate is, well, shouldn't this be Ukraine's land? But Russia says no, it's ours. And like you say, those two areas which are sympathetic to Russia wanted to join them, and it's a mess. Like you say, all these competing factions. Like we want to join NATO, we want to join Russia,
we want independence.
Yeah.
And see, here's the thing. So it's hard for me not to kind of understand those people when an international group has to tell your country that your election was a hoax.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden this guy comes in, and then the American president, like, first off, they impeached the last guy because he tried to take away a guy's job in the Ukraine. And then the guy who just won, he won at least on record.
Yeah.
Because his son with the job in the Ukraine, the pictures, we weren't allowed to know those were real.
Even though they were, and the media admitted it later.
And that's just on record that there was literally like someone.
But I mean, there's video footage there's video footage of the current guy saying.
That's just what we know happened.
Well, but I mean, there's video footage.
Who knows what secrets lie within the mysterious realm?
No, but you've probably seen that video, right, going viral of him bragging about getting the prosecutor fired or Ukraine would get the aid taken away. There's footage of him saying this openly. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen it, but my point is, it's like
they accuse him of quid pro quo for trying to. For actually following through with the Constitution, where it says you gotta make sure there's no corruption if you're going to give money to a foreign power.
Yeah.
Because like, I happen to know there's corruption here. So he's like literally following through with it.
Yeah.
They said like that's some kind, and that failed miserably. Yeah. But they did the thing, and they tried to punish him because the guy who's in charge.
Yeah.
Now we might start World War III because of the things that are happening because of him. Now the health of everybody. All of a sudden, that's not Ukraine.
But the thing is, like, that's one of those things that people said like was conspiracy theory or whatever. But I'm like, there's literally footage of him saying, "Oh yeah, I had that." There was a prosecutor and I told them no aid, but they got rid of him, put a good guy in. Yeah, because the guy was investigating your son and you didn't want anything dug up. So you got someone in who wasn't going to do anything.
Like, why would I even need to hear a Republican speak?
Yeah.
Like to be.
It's like it's on video. It's on video of him. And it's like, and then also just the fact that the son had no experience in the energy sector or didn't know anything about, like, why else did he get that? He got the job because of who his father was. That's it. I mean, it's like, how do you trust these people at this point? I don't know. Like,
it's physically impossible. Like anyone else. Like, no, not anyone else. But literally, this is disgusting. Okay, like that's all. And I can't help but think I can't blame. Like, there's no actual, like you said, so there's postmodernism. Postmodernism was invented because of the problems we were describing before. So not only is it that you can watch within our own country that our subsidizing of the poor actually makes it worse, and the poor actually do better for their own families than the government ever possibly can, or some class being, put above them by the government ever possibly can for them. But they used to say, like, well, that's not working here because we're not real communists.
Yeah.
Over there, and there were articles in the news and in college papers up until the day before the USSR fell, that all the genocides over there and all the starvations and all this shit, that was just a capitalist propaganda campaign. And so what? So they created postmodernism, and postmodernism, the reason why you might be like, postmodern, that's impossible. Modern is constant.
Yeah.
That's the point. The point is that It's like, well, we must be wrong because everything is wrong.
Yeah.
So let's be wrong on purpose in ways that feel good. And let's call that virtue. Let's claim that is what all virtue ever meant. That's morality now, and that's truth, and that's strength. And so essentially, psychologically, they're breeding drug addicts and sex addicts and people who don't understand objectivity enough to have any boundaries of identity. You know, it's not that they think that one thing or another. That could actually be stable, whether you agree with it or not. And that person will have standards, and they'll stick to them, and they'll know them themselves, and they'll care what you think, maybe to the degree they're insecure.
But Hicks even addresses these contradictions in his book, because he makes the point. They say things like morality is relative, yet, you know, racism, sexism, whatever are the worst things ever. You know, cultures are relative, yet white Western culture, which is kind of a flawed concept, is the most evil culture. Right. You know, there's no such thing as truth, but my belief system tells it like it is. It's like you see all these things can't be true, but then you get into debates with people today and you realize they pretty much imbibe that mentality. Because I've had debates with people where I'll say things, they'll be like, "Oh, that's your opinion," but I'll be like, "Okay, this is verifiable," whatever. They won't listen to me, but then they'll just assert things. I'll be like, "Is this verifiable?" They'll be like, "Well, no." It's like, but then why am I supposed to just agree? Like, what you're saying is automatically true. Everything else is opinion or subjective. It's like,
so I encourage you to argue with me if I'm wrong, or I hope I'm wrong in all this. So it seems like they seem to be aware that their idea of due north, what they call due north, let's say, is south. They seem to be aware of that. And to be caught between a rock and a hard place, kind of like we all are, where it's like, okay, well, why should I be moral if I'm not going to get social credit for it?
Well,
if it's actually...
Well, what I was going to say is I think it also has to be distinguished between the thinkers and the people pushing the ideas versus the rank and file people who adhere to them. Because, like, for example, critical race theory has been in the news a lot, and Kimberly Crenshaw, who along with Derek Bell was one of the creators of it, Crenshaw also came up with intersectionality, and she was interviewed on MSNBC and asked about, is this related to Marxism at all? And she basically said no. But the thing is, if you read her own writing, she actually says this draws from Marxism, postmodernism, whatever. So the thing is,
Marx said to lie to manipulate people.
Yeah. So she knows what it says and she's lying, but the adherents are either lying themselves or they just don't know. And I'm willing to bet, like with the gender stuff, in many cases they just don't know, but it's like they just go along with it because they feel they're supposed to. But then when you press them on it,
Since I put myself on the spot earlier, this is actually part of why I look at the Bible and I think this is some profound stuff.
Sure.
So at the end of the Bible, there's wheat from the chaff goes on, and there's like society gets split into thirds, and in what he just said, I actually hear it, because there's people who know and like it or don't care.
Yep.
There's the ignorant, and then there's someone else that's like, I know and I care.
Yeah.
And actually, like, those are three different groups of people that intermingle all the time, but existentially, it's completely different, and in the terms of psychology and how you're to order yourself and how to make decisions, that's actually very relevant.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, I am that crazy person, and it's like I'm not experiencing the things I believe in and being like, oh well, one day Steven will watch a movie that I did and he'll have the same pathological problems that I do, and then we will agree with words that we don't know what they mean.
Well, because I was saying to someone, another corollary between the gender stuff is that even a lot of the people who like Marx, or at least sympathetic to his ideas, very few of them have actually read him directly. That's one thing I realized recently, because if you bring up like errors he made and everything, they have no idea because they haven't read him directly. They just like the idea of the rich are bad, the poor have to overthrow them and seize their wealth. But if you get into
well, sometimes that's true.
But my point is, if you get into his concept of classes and the flaws with that, if you get into the labor theory of value, if you get into capital versus labor intensive industries, all this, they don't know because they haven't actually sat down and read the material. It's just they kind of like what he says. And the gender stuff, same thing. It's like if you break it down, like okay, you're saying there's no gender binary, but you're still using male and female as reference points, and it's like, well, okay, but that is a binary. And the analogy I and others have used is like, think of temperature. You can be more hot or more cold, but you're still using those as reference points. Like, you don't jump out and become something else entirely. It's either hot, cold, lukewarm, or just shifting more in one direction or the other.
You can't create a new, like, you can't.
It doesn't become some other category of temperature.
Like if you can find one and display it, then it's real.
But then they also they try to bring up like intersex people, but then you point out that those people identify with either the genitals they have or how they, and then intersex itself is a broad category, and that has different conditions. So it's like they try to like nitpick exceptions, which still sort of
our conversations. See, and I could be, maybe I'm definitely crazy.
Most of the people I associate with are.
Haven't we become that? And here I am. Haven't we become a little bit too like sexualized as culture, where it's like, oh, if you're gay enough, you're not a man. You gotta associate your identity not just with how you look. Which you can play with a little bit. Look at my damn eyebrows. I gotta fuck with these every day. And then you should see what my hair is like if I do certain things or I don't do certain things, kind of. Anyway, that's not the point. And I'm spoiled as fuck in a lot of ways. That's not the point. What I'm trying to say is, so these things that can cause self-esteem issues, and everyone is going to feel both insecure and proud of at the same time. That's our identity now, and it's mostly secret. And now I'm supposed to, it's like, that's not even why, and that's why transgenders were able to exist in the first place, because that's so fucking private. Yeah. Right? So now there's people with gender dysphoria, which, I'll acknowledge is in my opinion, an illness, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody, to be honest with you, but I don't think of those people as being actively socially regressive and trying to tear down society. No. They believe in gender roles and have this way that they want you to treat them, and they're not necessarily, that doesn't mean anything about their belief in consent or anything like that. So obviously I've never had a problem with those people. And then there's this culture that's claiming to be like, well, we're good for those people. And they're degrading the roles that those people use to shelter themselves the way everyone does. But
the debate
wrong.
The recurring debate I have.
But stupid.
The recurring debate I have with one of our mutual friends, I don't know if she'd want me to mention the name here, but what I say is, we always talk about the issues with children. I say how this is morally reprehensible because it's like you're basically experimenting on kids, and then her argument is like, oh, children want this. I'm like, but do children know what they're getting into, or is it the parents are like, oh, my boy feels feminine, let me send him in for hormone blockers and everything. I'm like,
and that's
evil. That's child abuse. But I keep saying this. But then I say this to her, and she's
that's
like,
chemical castration.
But then I say this to her, and she's like, oh well, kids want hormones, they're gonna get them. I'm like, no, you don't get it. It's not the kids on their own going to doctors and saying, hi, I want to become a girl, pump me full of hormones, cut me up. No, that's not what's happening. It's parents who have bought into all this, who are experimenting on their kids.
I don't think most people even need to fucking hear this, and that's why.
That's why I get annoyed, because I'm like, you're basically you're defending child abuse.
Yeah, I agree with you. Here's the thing, anyway, I just said what I said, and I believe it, legitimately.
Because people try to
I care about people with different psychological positions. Let alone ailments.
But people have tried to trip me up on this, being like, "Oh, you're a libertarian, don't you believe in freedom?" I'm like, no, but it's different for adults versus kids.
Child should not have to suffer.
That's the point. If Blair,
physical maiming because their parents has a psychological ailment.
Yeah, Blair White.
There's limits.
Blair White transitioned when she was late teens, or there was Deirdre McCloskey, who was born Donald McCloskey, who became a woman later in life, but she was 50 something or whatever, and I'm like, look, I mean, it's not my thing, but you're a 50-year-old person. I'm not going to stop you. But if it's, oh, my child's confused about their identity, that's where I draw the line.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, people also, Blair White interviewed a bunch of detransitioners because Blair is trans herself, but and then they all said, like, I regret this if I had known.
Consent laws.
Yeah.
We have these laws where it's like, well, if you're not this age, and you're with someone that's this age,
your brain's not fully developed. You can't make,
Sometimes, if they know that they won't report you because they know you're honest about it. Yeah. But really, that's a fucking crime. Yeah. And really, it's made for these predators because there's people and they acknowledge it that when you're doing that predatorily, like sex, when you're doing that, you're not doing it for gratification. It's not a natural, healthy act. You're doing it for the sake of control. Yeah. That you don't feel when you're alone, even though that makes absolutely no, because you have more control over your own body. Yeah. So it's a psychological. So here we are, and we have psychology. We've had it for a long time, and now it's offensive. It's offensive to point out what sanity is, literally what literacy is, what math is, what the scientific method is. Like, we've come to, and these people claim that they're the ones who believe in science because their idea is newer, even though dumbass shit is as old as time. Yeah. Well,
but again, I make the point, it goes back to Marx. He called his socialism scientific, but if you actually read about it, it has its roots in Gnosticism, Hermeticism, heretical strains of Christianity.
And he fucked it all up. I can guarantee. I'm all that shit. Yeah. He does not represent us. Thank you.
And one of my good Jewish friends even makes the point that he took some of the stuff, like ideas from their writings, but like he either misapplied them or twisted them to fit his ideas. Yes. And that's the whole point. But it's like the analogy, Alexander Gray, he wrote a book called The Socialist Tradition from Moses to Lenin, and one of the points, the analogy he made with Marx's writing is he basically built a house out of various bricks taken from different places, and then my friend added on to it. He's like, he built the house, and then the house collapsed on itself.
You can't make a scientific religion. Like,
no,
it could
you can't.
Be wrong, but you really fucking can't. You can have, I still have my opinions, and I believe, and I believe Jordan Peterson agrees with me. Religion is a part of your mind. Yeah. It's the part of you handling the abstracts that can't necessarily be comprehended with objective thought at the time, perhaps, and maybe they become objective, and that's why I said, maybe there could be a scientific religion, but really, all religion is already trying to be scientific.
But but I mean, even the epistemology is different because science is originally Aristotle's epistemology and metaphysics applied. The idea of reason, like, okay, let's use our senses, study the world, test it, verify. Now, obviously, it became more rigorous over time, but that was the basis for it. Whereas religion, especially Christianity, explicitly says take things on faith. That's at odds.
Right, like because you don't quite understand them objectively.
But those things can't be reconciled. That's the point. It's like you either have to go with one or the other.
And when you do reconcile them, they become one or the other. Yeah. They're not both. And when they are both, you don't have to, like, they're no longer really an argument. Like, here's the thing. So I think if I ask Stephen right now, is water sacred?
I'd say no.
You don't think water is sacred?
No.
Okay, why isn't water sacred? This is an interesting conversation, if anything.
Well, I mean, we know what it's made of. We know that it serves important life purposes. Mm-hmm. I guess maybe what you're getting at is that in a lot of religions it's used for sacred purposes. It has certain, like, holy
water. I think
water
is sacred. All life, as I know it, relies on water. It's sacred to me.
Well,
I would say water is sacred and the sun's sacred, and that.
Thales, the philosopher, he believed water was the basis for everything. Right. Yes, because he believed, like, you cut open plants, water comes out. You need crops, need water.
Now I gotta ask you what your definition of sacred is, because because to me sacred is just highest value. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying.
So to me, yes, water is sacred because water is of the highest value. There are situations that I can find myself in where I would give everything for water, and it's because through water I get everything else. I get all life, and so to a degree, it's God. So
Well,
so I can explain that to you.
Sure.
And like you're not gonna go like, oh, that's science in the way you understand physical science, but like you said, like philosophy, science comes from philosophy, and philosophy, metaphysics, objectivity, math, logic. That's science. That's where science comes from.
Aristotle's applied epistemology and then metaphysics. Yeah.
So anyway, but that was an interesting answer. Continue.
Well, I was going to say then the other one, Heraclitus, he was known as the weeping philosopher. He went the opposite way. He believed that fire was the basis of everything. And one of my friends was
I like both those guys.
But one of my friends was making the point that in a way that's true, because you think about it, what is matter is made up of stored energy, and what is energy basically? You know, you could compare it to fire. So I thought that was an interesting observation. Then with Thales, you could make the case that water and things, but also the sun, what's it made of? There's hydrogen and oxygen. It's not the exact ratio, or else it would be liquid, not fire. But the fact that it's based off similar things, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Okay. But I am interested. Do you have a definition for sacred that made you go, water is not sacred? Or are you just like, were you just like, no, but I specifically disagree with Thales?
Well, no, because I guess I'm trying to think of how I would even define sacred, but I think
it's okay if you don't have,
Because it's one of those words we use all the time, but like, how do you put it into words? It's things associated with divine, but then,
so
we
can still talk to each other, and I can completely understand where he's coming from, and I don't think he was like, oh, that's crazy. You really, have that much respect for water.
No, because there's
just respect. Well, he was like, that makes perfect.
My point was also so many religions value it as an important thing, and there's reasons for that. I mean, even if we didn't fully understand, because you think of
it doesn't make it a scientific religion either. No. It makes it like but religion is still a product. Everything is a product.
Well, it's a way of trying to understand the world. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Oh, well, what was I saying? I was saying the mind. Yeah, I did say it. I finished it. The mind has a religious. Because
Silas and I discussed that book, Why We Believe in Gods, and one of the I thought it was very interesting because I got into the psychology and sociology and everything. Nice. But the point, it's a very interesting book.
This was a good conversation already. We got 15 minutes left, I believe. Continue.
But one of the points one of my friends had, he kind of echoed. He kind of echoed what you said. He kind of echoed what you said a little while ago. How I think the problem is that a lot of these new atheist types, they see religion as some like foreign entity in the brain, and it's a matter of taking it out. And then
like nobody would have come up with that. And really, you see faces in like freaking the sand and shit. Like you could look at any surface, and your brain starts looking for humans in it. There's a face on the moon supposedly, and like literally, and that's because you're trying to communicate. So what they've done is they've watered down, they flattened the part of your brain. Wrinkles are why you can think. They flattened that part of your brain for communication, and you're out here like, oh, I'm class conscious because I don't know how to communicate in symbolism. Oh, I'm extra smart. Why am I poor now and everybody hates each other? Why am I unhappy? Why don't I believe in monogamy anymore and still I'm unhappy?
Well, but also...
Sorry.
But also, I always think of Nietzsche's prediction about how religion didn't die; it's just people create religions out of other things. And in recent times, the whole discussion regarding COVID, that's what that's been like. There's studies showing masks don't help. People insist on wearing masks all the time. People who have to get every vaccine, and then if there's a breakout, they blame it on the unvaccinated. People showing off their vaccine cards. People like taking pictures with masks on. And the point is, you're recreating those religious archetypes just out of something else. I mean, that's where the nickname Branch Covidian comes from. For those who don't know, it's a play on Branch Davidian. Those were the people that were roasted at Waco's. I mean, it was a religious cult, but the idea is it's the same thing with this. It's like you built a whole life and a whole identity around COVID, and like you're making every part of life. And then when these restrictions are ending, life's gradually returning to normal, hopefully soon. It's like sad to you because you've built...
When God doesn't appear, it turns out your priests are actually the opposite.
Yeah.
You just don't do anything.
Yeah, because you've bought into this for 2 years now. And now,
more important than God now, science, whatever.
Yeah. And it's not just this. I mean, you can apply it to Marxism. You can apply it to some people are talking about like
just people
environmentalist stuff. I mean, that follows
stuff too. Like exactly.
It's like you didn't get rid of religion. You just replaced it with something else.
Because it's a part of your brain that wants to have social connection,
Yeah.
and be able to communicate and be able to know kind of more or less what the person near you values on
Yeah.
any level, and that doesn't mean we should all value the same thing.
Well,
but
also
it means-
just purpose in life in general. That's how I see it. It's like you want a sense of fulfillment in, oh, I helped beat COVID. I'm one of the good people.
And
Yeah.
here's why I don't consider us harping on about feminism some screwed up thing, you know? Because I feel like by redefining words, they've really screwed up our ability to say what we want. And that not regardless, you're not gonna like what 90% of people want for themselves, and it's not your fucking business.
Yeah.
Because they're meant for their own lives and the people they're doing, having consensual relationships with in business, in love, in friendship, in anything, in hobbies, in anything that might be. That's their shit. That's what I believe in.
But you just hit on an important point because that's a postmodernist idea, the idea that language shapes reality rather than language describes reality.
Right.
And that distinction is important because if you go back, Enlightenment and shortly thereafter, the idea is no, definitions matter, words are descriptions of reality, but then it became no, words are a reflection of power functions and then we have to redefine things in order to change the power dynamics, and that's where microaggressions and all that comes
and
from.
the power dynamics haven't changed at all, but instead now most people in charge, because everyone's in charge to a degree, if you study, believe it or not, political and economic science, you can't run society without getting everyone to do it for you, which means you have to fucking motivate them. It's called the moral law in Sun Tzu, alright? We're all irresponsible as shit now, at best, and at worst we have philosophies that sabotage us, and we think we're just super competitive. And we're not the first people to have this problem. They seem to be mimicking, and I've forgotten the name of the problem, unfortunately, and again I learned about this through Jordan Peterson. But there's this problem where if there's a lot of natural resources in a place, for some reason the people, they have a lot of, there's a lot of violence in that place, and there's a lot of generational poverty.
Yeah.
And what they find is that those people, it turns out that if you fight for say, goods in that scenario where there's a lot of goods just lying around, you can make a lot of goods very quickly. You can get a lot of goods very quickly, whereas if you're making them, someone could take them from you very quickly, and you put the work in to make them.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, that makes fighting and aggression and sabotage and things like that more productive than productivity itself. Meanwhile, exactly, because there's already goods around.
Yeah.
So you end up creating, through extra wealth that nobody worked to gain, this culture of this low trust, one would say criminal culture, and the only way you could say not criminal is by being these postmodernists, relativists that will say, well, if their society is more criminal, then then crime has less definition there, so they can't be criminal in their own society, which by definition eliminates crime from the whole equation, which is how they've been treating everything. Except you, if they're criticizing you right now.
Well, because I was going to make, if you want to go in the opposite direction, look at Japan and Switzerland. Like, those are basically, those countries have no natural resources. I mean, Switzerland, they were mercenaries, later became bankers. It's one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. Clean, safe, orderly. Same thing with Japan. Japan has virtually no natural resources, yet it became one of the wealthiest countries. I mean, in the 80s, they thought they'd overtake everything. And then they had issues with their demographics, their banking, lost decade. That's a whole other conversation. But the point is, I mean, if you're just going to base wealth off natural resources, they should be the poorest. And that's obviously
and
not.
Africa's rich as hell.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, here's the thing. So the richest man in history was Mansa Musa still. You know, they could say anything they want about, like, oh, this is just a scientific fact, white supremacy. It's like, then when are we going to get the richest man in history?
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, I don't give a fuck. Like, good for you. Mansa Musa seemed like a real nice guy, actually. And I'm proud of him because he's human. Legit, that happened. However, that's real life, that's history. And what was I saying? I was saying, so we now, because of our situation in the Western world, technology, we're kind of in this situation where, and we don't know how to produce most of this shit. And most of what we do is social pruning. We're a service economy.
Yeah.
So we're sort of like a bunch of tribalists in a situation with a lot of natural resources we couldn't produce ourselves.
Yeah.
That we love to cancel people and get into fights in
Yeah.
the street and steal things
Yeah.
so long as they're less than $1,000 and things like that. And it's like, isn't that like well, it's not like there's science to show that this would happen. Oh wait, there is. It's all the science. There is no science against it. The only way at this point that you could argue against it is by saying, well, maybe in the future they'll find out it's wrong. And that's what postmodernism is. Literally. And that's been true for at least 10 years, at least as long as, since I went to college, and all that happened. I didn't go to the greatest, some hidden gem of a... No, the guy is Hostos Community College, and all the guy did was point out what was in the textbook and read it to me, and he was a responsible, good guy who believes in doing his job.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't agree with him, and I think that he's literally part of the problem, but literally he had some integrity to tell me his job and tell me what he does, and he tried to recruit me with some integrity. You know, I'm just telling you guys. That's it. Like, I'm not telling you to do anything for me or to vote for anyone for me. I don't know who to vote for, especially at this point. This is getting complicated.
There aren't many people worth voting for you.
This is getting complicated. Like, I'm not here like, oh, and you should be in my religion or my political faction. No, I actually believe that if you don't make a decision yourself, it can't be a good decision. Agreed. That's part of my fucking religion. You know, but that's me.
Yeah.
But and that's already, that's not supposed to exist. That's supposed to be materially impossible. And that's why people get confused. Why weren't you raised by a person with specifically, you know, your upbringing? Because you could only think like this if you were like born into this culture and no one screw with you ever. And it's literally the opposite. It's like, you know, the more people screw with me, the less I can help being this. The more stupid this becomes, the less I can follow the bullshit narrative that I'm supposed to be able to. Like, that's the thing. So it's like, so I'm wired at this point to give a fuck, right, about this shit that I know is total horseshit and is screwing everyone over. It's making everyone stressed out. It's making it so a lot of
turning
people
the frogs gay.
It's turning the frogs. No, you know what I'm saying. Like, I'm wired. I've always tried to be sensitive because I either know about things or believe things that other people don't. That have to do with how society's been running for about 100 years. You know, since like 1913. And I'm sensitive, but this has become like an extra thing, right? So it's like, okay, you know, I put on this mask even though it's filled with carcinogens, and if you don't have probiotics, it's actually bad for you, and you know, and literally the people who put it on harder, it's actually worse for them because they can breathe less. And you know, and then there's the vaccine. Like, oh, I can't tell everybody. Well, you know, a lot of things that are scientifically like it's part of the vaccine, like. Insert, like, and it's things that they didn't want to share with us, and then they did, and it's on the CDC website. Like, there's so much. And I just, you know, okay, and you got me like that. You got me like that because I got to do business in society, and I don't want to kill everyone's Easter bunnies all at once. I've never wanted to. You know what I'm saying? If you know what I mean, like telling a kid the Easter bunny doesn't exist, it's like you've killed the Easter bunny. You've killed Santa. You know, like people want to kill Jesus. And it's what it is. What I'm trying to say is, like, so we got this fucking Easter bunny, and I'm supposed to fucking tiptoe around this Easter bunny, right? Or I'm disrespectful, and I'm acting like grandma's gonna die. So supposedly I'm giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. They think that Easter bunny not being real or something, or me, you know, walking through that thing like it doesn't exist, grandma will die. And now it's becoming clear, like, that's impossible. You know, there's no way anyone thinks that, especially not anymore. It looks like they were lying a lot on purpose, and they literally are admitting, like, we didn't tell you everything. We thought that if you knew everything, you would do things we didn't want you to do.
And then is it for your health, or is it just based on what you want us to, we want you to do?
There we go. So And now, Russia, Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to forget about the whole thing with Ukraine from the election and before, right?
Yeah.
Everything. And so to me, exactly, this is like the more bullshit I go through, it's like, so how would a sincere fucking idiot keep up with this shit? Imagine you're the moron you expect out of fucking people.
Yeah.
Okay, that you've been treating everyone on earth like, you know. How? So there's a plague, okay? Africa was already going to die of HIV/AIDS, you know. It was already going on. Let's not talk about that, how the population is booming and they need more vaccines. And in India, too, where people have the best immune systems on earth, people need more vaccines. That's science and truth, you know, because it's far away. But this is right close by.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, you know, oh, the plague. I thought there was a plague, and the elderly, and that's why I need to be asked my papers on the street, and that's why the Constitution doesn't matter because there's a big plague.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you claim, like, don't get me wrong, like, I actually believe in stewardship.
Yeah.
You might think, oh, he doesn't believe in regulation. He must believe not believe in responsibility and taking care of things. No, I simply believe that when you take responsibility for something, it's individually, and that's ownership.
Yeah.
And that without that, there's no way of having consequences when things go wrong, and I should have consequences like everyone else, and everyone should.
Yeah.
And that is why the tragedy of the commons happens and why things had to switch over.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say? So, as someone who does care about people that aren't always intellectually on every ball, how many people have you just destroyed?
Yeah.
Their Easter bunny is dead now.
Yeah.
What, you're going to act like you're their friends?
No.
What happened? I thought you knew. I thought they were just so stupid this was a better idea. They'll never remember. But it doesn't matter now, does it? Like, that's all. That's my perspective.
An hour, by the way, I think.
Cool. I thank you.
Sure.
If we didn't, it's a little shorter. I'm sorry that I had to end on that note, but like, this is good for me kind of piercing through, like, figuring out what the hell's going on in my brain.
Yep.
And I like to share it with you.
Yeah. I always enjoy these conversations. Hope you do too. And as time passes, hopefully bring more people on and let's keep it going.
Oh, I'm about to bring a whole bunch more people on.
Good.
And I gotta help out these Streetwear Bears people. I'm so happy to be working with them. They are some of the realest folks you'll ever meet.
Cool.
And I'll be happy to have them on when I can.
Cool.
And thank you all for watching.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate you. Like and subscribe.
Yep.
And take a look at Active Articulations, Streetwear Bears, and Prolific.
Sure.
Thank you very much.